right now, let's hop right into it. A book that I happened to find the other day while I was on the internet, and I love these kind of books. Our friend Dave Kindred has written a book, one of many books he's written, Mighty in Heart, Morton's Lady Potters Win It All. And Dave, thanks for coming on today. I know it's kind of early, but man, I love talking high school basketball, and I think you're a big Morton Potter fan, aren't you?
Well, we've been here. We're Central Illinois people, my wife and I. We moved back here 6 years ago. I got caught up in going to the local girls' high school teams, games, loved them, found a guy who had a website. I started writing for him, and I've been writing every game for 6 years now.
You know, you've been around, and we'll talk about some of that stuff later, but I mean, you've been around to every big national, worldwide sport in the world. Why did girls basketball all of a sudden just kind of hit that sweet spot for you?
Well, we had a friend whose daughter played on the team to begin with, and I was kind of semi-retired. I didn't have a full-time job. I just wrote for whoever paid me to write, and I was doing a couple books, and I'd go to these games, and, you know, I'm 75 years old. I started my first reporting was high school basketball. I played high school basketball about 40 miles from here, and it took me back to the beginning. It was like closing the circle. All these little gyms that I used to go to work in, I was now there again just watching basketball. I loved the girls' games. They were very good to begin with. You know, if they weren't very good, I probably wouldn't still be watching them 6 years later. But they were a good team. I liked the games. It was simple. You know, you go, you watch. There's no halftime extravaganza. There's no commercials. You know, it's just 32 minutes of basketball, and you go home and you write about it. You know, what's not to love? I've liked it.
Wouldn't you say it's kind of refreshing to go to some high school sports like that after all the stuff that you went through? That's what it sounds like to me. Well,
it's absolutely pure. I mean, it's literally just basketball for basketball's sake. I mean, there's nothing else to it. There's no great pressure on it. You know, these girls are not, you know, maybe a couple of them can play Division I basketball, a couple might play Division III basketball, but it's just earnest effort. You know, they're all good kids. They're all honor roll students. You know, it was just, I mean, it really is what you get into the business for. You know, I've always, you know, no matter where I was, Olympics, World Series, Super Bowls, heavyweight championship fights, whatever it was, I was always interested in what was happening between the lines. I wanted to know what was happening in the game. I didn't care so much about the hype and the extravaganzas. In fact, I didn't like it at all. I just wanted to go watch a game. You know, the NBA used to drive me crazy because you'd sit at courtside, great basketball, great players, but it was just incessant music, incessant selling of something. And the game was secondary. Like the Super Bowl, the game is like the last thing anybody cares about. You know, and so when I go to these games now, Morton High School against East Peoria, you know, it's just a little basketball game, and I've loved it.
You know, I always say the girls' basketball is the way basketball should be played. You know, boys kind of improvise what they do, but girls go out and run plays and actually execute the fundamentals, and that's what I enjoy about girls' basketball the most.
Well, the first time that I went to a serious girls' game was 1979. The University of Maryland women played in the Final Four somewhere in California. I forget where it was, but Wilt Chamberlain was there, and Wilt said that, you know, Wilt had a thing for women, I guess, but he also had a thing for basketball, and he liked the game. He said the difference here is that we play above the rim, they play on the floor. You know, otherwise, and John Wooden, you know, I talked to John Wooden about women's basketball once. He said that he preferred women's basketball because they had to master the fundamentals. They couldn't overcome their mistakes with athleticism. They couldn't jump over their mistakes. They couldn't outrun them. They had to play basketball the way it's supposed to be played, in balance. You know, 5 people touch the ball every time down the floor. They had to work to make it play. You know, and so that's what it's been for me. I mean, I've written 200,000 words now in 6 years. You know, for the guy who runs the website is the father of one of the players. Paid me a box of Milk Duds every game, finally. I told him I'm a professional writer. I need to get paid. So he started paying me. He gave me a box of Milk Duds every game, and I was happy with that.
That's like being in radio, Dave. You know that's
yeah.
Hey, you know, when I look
it does take me back to my beginnings. It's about what I got paid, when I was just out of high school covering basketball, too.
We're talking to Dave Kindred. He wrote the book Mighty in Heart. It's about the Morton Potters girls basketball team who's won a couple state championships in a row. And, there is a local connection here in Rockford, Dave. The fact is that I think the first year that they wrote about that you featured the story, they beat a local team, Rockford Lutheran, in the super sectional. So there's a little bit of local interest here.
Yes, they did. That was it's one of those teams that down here, when I say down here, Morton is about, 80 miles south of Rockford, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
The teams up north always seem, big and mean, and like there's no way that these little girls from the pumpkin patches of Morton are going to beat any of those kind of Chicago area teams. And they've done it the last 2 years, and it's been fun to watch them play. Everybody got all excited about the Golden State Warriors this year, for instance, when they were 73-9. Well, in the Morton High School Lady Potters last 82 games, they were 74-8. So it's in fact, you can take it even farther than that if you want. But they're 33-3 the last 2 years, won state championships. I started watching this team. I never had any idea it could win a state championship. I had no idea of the caliber of play anywhere. But these girls have played the way that the best girls teams play, which is just with kind of relentless pressure. Just keep playing hard at both ends of the floor, and eventually it wears people out.
And the book is kind of based on the title when Morton head coach, I guess Bob Becker, told you one time, they're not mighty in stature, but they're mighty in heart and competitive fire. Have you seen that in that team?
Every game. It's amazing to me. I mean, they won the state championship 2 years ago. Well, both years, really. Their biggest player is 5'11", maybe probably 5'10", a center, Brandy Bisping, and their next biggest player is 5'8". They all were small. They were always the smallest team on the floor, but they take care of the ball. They shoot well. They had one really great shooter, a gifted shooter, Chandler Ryan, who was going to Florida Gulf Coast University.
Good choice.
She got hurt 9 games into last season, tore her ACL. Her career was over, but the team went on and won a state championship, even without this girl who was averaging 20 points a game. They just do everything kind of right. They come at you on defense all the time. They're always pressuring you on offense. And they just don't make many mistakes, and they make every free throw. You don't want to get behind on Morton in the fourth quarter because they make all the free throws. I think that's how they beat Rockford Lutheran, in fact.
Yeah, I saw some highlights on the news of that. That looked like they handled it was like a 1-point game at halftime, and after that they took control.
Yep, that's the way that they do it. They wear people out. I just think it's pure sports. It's pure high school athletics. Is pure Americana. It's just a part of life that people who do nothing but watch ESPN, have no idea. The thousands of teams, and in my time, Dave, I became a professional sports writer in 1959. Actually, worked my way through college, Illinois Wesleyan. In my time, the best thing that's happened to sports has been Title IX. That required everyone to provide for girls and women the same thing that they provided for men. And it's opened up a whole world of sports that still a lot of people don't know about, don't care about.
Yep.
Even Morton, where they've won 2 state championships, they'll have 100 people at games, mothers, fathers, grandfathers. People are missing a great thing in not watching high school girls basketball, because it's pure sport, a pure piece of Americana that should be treasured.
We're running a little short on time, but I got this one line from your book. It's Hoosiers for girls, only better. Tell us what that meant to you, Dave Kindred.
Well, it's small town stuff. If you've seen Hoosiers, it's a small town team going against the big shots. I always pit it as the girls from the pumpkin patches against the girls from Chicago, because Chicago is dominated. Morton is the first and only small town public school ever to win a state championship at the Class 3A. So that's what it is. It's Hoosiers. It's this fantasy that's made real. It's Hoosiers, only better because it's real.
And, before I let you go, I know you had a good relationship with Muhammad Ali, did a story on him. Tell us one thing about Muhammad Ali that maybe would be interesting to our listeners today, Dave.
Well, everything about Muhammad Ali is interesting. I met him 50 years ago, wrote about him every year since then. I met him in Louisville, my first real job. Did a book on Ali and Cosell. Ali was the greatest athlete I ever saw, the greatest athlete anyone will ever see. Beautiful in motion. He was, and he loved people. He wanted people with him all the time. The most accessible of stars. My favorite moments always were when he'd have 20 or 30 newspaper people around. He'd be looking at you, and if you weren't taking notes, he'd stop and say, "You getting this down? This is heavy, man." Making sure we were paying attention.
Dave, thanks so much for being on today. Can we do this again some other time, maybe during girls' basketball season? Maybe
sure,
talk.
Dave, I'm in the works of doing a second book right now.
Great, and I love the one you sent me. Thanks for sending it to me. I paid for it. It's a good book, and I love it. And thanks so much for being on today.
Thank you.
We've been talking with Dave Kindred, the author of Mighty in Heart, Morton's Lady Potters Win It All. Check out the posting we do later on today. You'll see what this guy's done. We didn't have a chance to talk to it, but what a fun interview, Dave Kindred. I enjoyed that.